the drafting of the partial travel ban, and he joins me now. Mr. Miller, welcome to Meet the Press.
Hey, good to be here, Chuck.
Let me start with the decision by the Ninth Circuit and the president himself saying to reporters that a new order may be drafted. Is that what you and others are doing right now, drafting a new order, since essentially the Ninth Circuit seemed to give you a roadmap of how to draw up something slightly more narrow that would accomplish your goal?
Well, we're considering all of our options right now, Chuck. That includes you can continue the appeal on the 9th, you can seek an emergency stay at the Supreme Court, you can have a trial hearing on the merits at the district level, or you can take it en banc for the emergency hearing also at the Ninth Circuit. And yes, you could pursue additional executive actions. The bottom line is that we are pursuing every single possible action to keep our country safe from terrorism. And I also want to be clear, we've heard a lot of talk about how all the branches of government are equal. That's the point. They are equal. There's no such thing as judicial supremacy. What the judges did, both at the Ninth and at the district level, was to take power for themselves that belonged squarely in the hands of the President of the United States.
Well, you say that very definitively, but obviously there isn't agreed upon that. Why are you so confident that, for instance, that you believe there is a 1952 law that gives the president the power to decide who can come in and out of this country on a temporary basis? Why do you believe that law supersedes 1965's, which says you cannot essentially decide on who comes in based on origin?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it in full. First of all, we know that the 1952 law, and you're referring to is 212F, 8 U.S.C. 1182F, because if it didn't have controlling supremacy between those two clauses, that would mean, Chuck, that during a time of war, that the President of the United States couldn't suspend admissions from the very country they were at war with. So obviously that's the controlling clause. Secondly, this is not a decision based upon national origins. It's a decision based upon security conditions in those countries. Syria is a disaster zone. Libya is in ruins. Yemen has a massive resurgent terrorism movement. These are decisions based upon the ability of those countries to cooperate with our intelligence services. As you know, Chuck, this was a decision made in 2015 and 16 in terms of designating these countries. We simply took that intelligence assessment and we took firm action to restrict entry. And the bottom line is the President of the United States, both under his Article 2 foreign powers, under the 1952 statute, has the power to control who enters our country. And you know and I know that no foreign national living in Yemen or any other country has a constitutional right to demand entry into our country.
Well, I understand that, but I guess I go back to if you do that, if this was about the security of the country, why wasn't Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, I can keep going down the list, where we have had foreign nationals from those countries that I've listed attempt terrorist acts in this country?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, 72 individuals, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, have been implicated in terroristic activity in the United States who hail from those 7 nations. Point one. Point two, the security determination about those countries is based upon an assessment of the threat they present today and going into the future. The security situation in Libya, Yemen, Syria, and other countries designated are squarely different today than they were in, say, 2001 or 2005 or 2010.
But San Bernardino, but San Bernardino happened, the whole point of the president's as a candidate. The whole point of this idea at the time of a full Muslim ban, and then he has since tapered it back, was in response to San Bernardino, where the spouse came from Saudi Arabia of Pakistan origin.
Well, you're 100%. Well, first of all, you're 100% correct. You're 100% correct that the San Bernardino incident demonstrated the profound degree to which our immigration system is vulnerable to terrorism. And the FBI has information right now that would clearly indicate the extent to which massive numbers of court cases are happening and have happened all over our country relating to terrorist infiltration of our immigration system. But if you look at the executive order, what it spells out is a 90-day period to put in place extreme vetting across the board. So the first 7 countries are based upon our determination about the security conditions in those countries and their ability to cooperate with us. But there's a 30-day period where new security measures are promulgated and a 60-day compliance period. And Chuck, I will be glad to come back on your show when that's done and walk you through how we've kept our country safe across the board from individuals coming into our country who don't share our values and who don't love our people.
Well, it's interesting you say about sharing values in this vetting process. I want to ask this. Number one, are you going to make public the new vetting procedures?
Well, first of all, I suppose there'll be aspects of those that will be public. And I'm sure that for reasons of national security, there'll be aspects of those that won't be. I mean, obviously, if you're engaged in a vetting procedure of a foreign national in a dangerous region, you don't want them to have a roadmap for everything they should say and do to get around those procedures. We don't want to forecast all of that. But there are obviously elements of it that would be part of routine online forms that everybody could see. So it just depends. But I think the important thing is this. 80 million people traveled into the United States last year through the airports, seaports, or land ports. We as a sovereign nation have the right to impose basic restrictions on entry to ensure our security, our quality of life, our economic and financial well-being. And the bottom line is that a district judge in Seattle cannot make immigration law for the United States, cannot give foreign nationals in foreign countries rights they do not have, and cannot prevent the President of the United States from suspending the admission of refugees from Syria.
Well, let me go to the issue of immigration as a whole. Do you believe there's too much legal immigration in this country?
I believe that we should have a program in which American workers are given jobs first. The President campaigned on this. It's an issue where the labor unions agree with us. It's an issue where many Democrat members of Congress agree with us. If you have an open job in this country, a U.S. citizen or existing legal permanent resident ought to have the ability to make the first application for that job. The problem is, and the way the media covers this issue, present company excluded, is they don't spend enough time talking about the well-being of the 300 million people here today, U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents, many of whom are living in poverty, many of whom haven't seen wage growth in 20, 30 years. And it's time we talked about them, their needs, their families, and their concerns. And yes, we'll have a lawful immigration system and will enrich and benefit our country. But the President has made clear he believes that should be a merit-based system, where individuals coming into the country bring the kinds of benefits economically that will grow our economy and help lift up wages for everybody.
But you didn't answer the question. Do you and the President believe there's too much legal immigration?
I think that I look forward to us rolling out immigration reforms, and I'll be able to announce very clearly when we do that what those do. I think that my views on this issue have been well discussed and well publicized, and I'd love to have a conversation with you to get into them in great detail. Where we're focused right now is two things: protecting the security of our country through interior enforcement and through screening of entrants, and additionally by ensuring that before a job is given to a foreign national, that job is offered first to an American worker, either a legal permanent resident or a U.S. citizen.
Well, I'm going to ask about what appears to be an immigration enforcement surge that has taken place over the last week. And it goes to the other executive order that had to do with immigration that was signed. How do you define a criminal act by an undocumented immigrant in this country? Is just being undocumented here illegally, is that enough of a criminal act to get you deported under this order?
The order describes a criminal offense, which would typically mean anything from a misdemeanor to a felony. In particular, the emphasis is on crimes that threaten or endanger public safety. But as you well know, you cannot order a federal law enforcement officer in ICE any more than you can in the FBI or the DEA or the Marshal Service to ignore the laws of the United States. It would be highly unethical for me in the White House or anybody else to pick up the phone and call an ICE officer and say, well, when you encounter this particular felon, we'd like you to pretend the law doesn't exist. But I can tell you right now, there are enforcement actions happening all over this country in which gang members, drug dealers, sex offenders are being swept up.
Felons. What about if the only crime they committed was being here illegally? Is that enough to be deported?
Sean, an immigration judge makes those decisions. An ICE officer makes those decisions. I in the White House don't make those decisions.
So you've not told them to prioritize or in either direction?
If people don't like the immigration laws of the United States, they can reform them. Our emphasis is on deporting and removing criminal aliens who pose a threat to public safety. And I just want to say this. There's been a lot of coverage in the news about the effects of these enforcement actions on people who are here illegally. And that's an issue people are free to discuss. But what's more important and what should be discussed more is the lives that are being saved, Chuck. The American lives that are being saved because we're taking enforcement action. And when we didn't take those actions in the past, you have families like the Wilkerson family and the Root family and the Mendoza family who lost people they loved because we were more concerned about the effects of enforcement on people here illegally than on the well-being of lawful immigrants and U.S. citizens.
So it sounds to me as if you're saying you did not tell ICE workers who to prioritize.
No, that's not correct. I'm saying that in the White House, it would be improper for me to tell them to disengage from enforcement action. The president has been clear, unequivocal, and explicit in saying that we're going to focus on removing individuals who pose a threat to public safety, including people who are gang members, who've been charged with criminal offenses, who've been multiple immigration violations, who've been deported and re-entered. I have a question. What would you say, Chuck? What would you say to a family member who lost someone they loved because an illegal immigrant who'd been deported 2 times and had a misdemeanor conviction was allowed to come back into the country a 3rd time because that wasn't deemed a priority and they lost someone they loved? Would you say, well, I'm sorry, it didn't meet our priority scale. We're going to focus on public safety and saving American lives, and we will not apologize
Mr. Miller,
for that.
Before I let you go, does the president still have confidence in his national security advisor?
That's a question that I think you should ask the president. The question you should ask Reince, the chief of staff. I'm here today as a policy advisor, and my focus is on answering the policy questions that you have. General Flynn has served his country admirably. He's a 3-star general. He's head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I look forward to having more discussions about this in the future.
So the White House did not give you anything to say other than that
They did not give me
Flynn.
anything to say.
You cannot say whether or not
and answer, Chuck.
The president still has confidence in his national security advisor.
It's not for me to tell you what's in the president's mind. That's a question for the president. It's a question for our chief of staff. Asked and answered, Chuck.
Let me ask you this. If you were caught misleading the Vice President of the United States, would that be considered a fireable offense in the Trump White House?
It's not for me to answer hypotheticals. It wouldn't be responsible. It's a sensitive matter. General Flynn has served his country admirably. He served his country with distinction. And I look forward to having a conversation with you once you've had a chance to talk with the appropriate people in the White House who are dealing with this matter. It would not be appropriate for me to speculate.
Stephen Miller, Senior Policy Advisor to the President. Thanks for coming on, sir. Appreciate you sharing your views.
Thank you.
And joining me now is one of the leaders of the Democratic Party these days.